What up, everybody? Scuffy here, and it is time for the weekly card by card reboot. I've been doing these, trying to get them done initially 2 every week. Now we're down to 1 every week. We've still got quite a ways to go. We are doing the Raven Guard, card by card. Still got quite a few to go. I'm hoping to get them all done by the end of the year, kind of catch everything up, follow up on these factions. How have they progressed? What do they look like from what they originally looked like? How are new cards added to the game, new neutrals, new playstyles affected their playability, their survivability, their usefulness one way or the other? What's seen play, what really should see more play, and what needs to just be refreshed altogether. And we're going with the Raven Guard. Before I get into that, I usually don't do the promotion stuff until the end, but I'm on a quest to hit that 500 subscriptions. I'm at 427, I think, for a free channel, doing 500. That's my goal by the end of the year. I've been doing this for 3 years now. I don't know how to beat YouTube's algorithm. I don't know how to do it, but I'm going to try to figure it out. If you like the videos, if you like what you see after all this and you want to subscribe or pass it on to people in your lodge, players that you know, please do so. Like, subscribe. If there's something that you want to see that you're not seeing, let me know in the comments, PM me on Discord, Reddit, whatever the case may be. Now, all that aside, let's get into the Raven Guard, card by card reboot. Now, full disclosure, the Raven Guard, when they debuted, they were the 3rd faction in the Istvan 5 expansion. But they were the first faction for me that really just like kicked the game up to another level. Primarily with the sentenced mechanic, but also told me that, okay, now we're getting into combos. Now the game is evolving. Now we're looking into play and play style. And it really, in a way, it was the faction that really got me into wanting to talk about the game more and look into spreading opinions, thoughts, deck types, and at the same time, you know, experience from other games that I have and how it relates to this game. Global chat wasn't doing it for me. You know, global chat had just a little bit of stuff that you could put in there, and through the course of that, that's where I kind of came across and ultimately found out about Discord and really dove into it a lot harder. And so in a way, Raven Guard is sort of the faction that really just got me started with what I do now. But it wasn't the first faction I played, obviously. I played for quite a long time. Emperor's Children was probably my primary go-to, just because I had Fulgrim, I had Pride of the Emperor, and I really just liked the way that they played. They just that on-curve reward. Now, Raven Guard play way different than that. As I mentioned, they're a combo-based faction. That means that they require various components to operate, and they have got some. They've got a mix as far as what they do. Now, they've obviously got the sentenced mechanic, which when you give a troop sentenced, if you haven't already experienced it, they take extra damage each time that they take damage, and sentenced can stack. So that's very easy to turn a target who has sentence 1, sentence 2, hit them with 2 or 3 different sources of damage, and then you're amping up that damage significantly each and every time. The trick is getting those pieces to the combo in order to make the most of it. As a playstyle, they are very fragile. They hit, they fade, they strike from the shadows. It feels a lot like the Raven Guard. And just when you think that they're at the end of their rope and you're about to deal lethal, it turns out it was an ambush all along and you fall right into their play. That's kind of how they have always felt. The faction as a whole is kind of waxed and waned. Right now they are on a strong waning spot, but that is about to change following information as well as just general player feedback during the recent Q&A with the Everguild developers yesterday. We'll be talking about Mortar Squad here in just a sec. But first, let's start with the Warlords. Let's talk about Agapito Nev. Now, Nev, when he first came out, he was the first Warlord, really, that a lot of people just compared directly to Loken from the Sons of Horus. And they said, well, how come he's better? Loken has got deal 2 damage, and he's got 30 health, and Nev doesn't do anything. And Nev had high initiative at the time. Loken had high initiative. By the time the Raven Guard came out, initiative was input into the game. So initiative existed. Nev started out with high. But then he also has this card draw if the target is sentenced. And a lot of people thought that that was unfair. And I guess they just didn't take into account, and this has always been my argument, but Loken is the starter warlord. He's a common warlord. He starts with the warlord. He starts with a faction that deals a lot of damage. Nev is Epic Warlord. It's a rare. It's two rarities higher by token. Vincent 6 is the next rarity higher. Then you go to Nev, and the fact that the faction as a whole doesn't have a lot of huge damage hitting tactics. They have little ping damage hitting tactics, and they rely on that combo. Nev, when he lost his initiative, when he went from high initiative to medium initiative, he really faltered quite a bit as a result of that. I think a lot of people dropped off playing him, and eventually Shuriken was added to the game, and people picked up more Corax, and eventually those are what people primarily play when they're playing Raven Guard. I think Nev plays just fine as he is now, especially with the addition of the counterattack. There are tools that the Raven Guard has had bolstered that still serve his playstyle, as well as just being able to consistently pump out 2 damage. He's not frequently played, but he is very played. As you can see with I think I did a video a while back following the Raven Guard changes. This is before the counterattack option, which really helps him out even further. So I think Neves is a solid warlord. He's a good warlord to choose. He just doesn't get a whole lot of attention, and normally it was because that medium initiative. But that medium initiative can kind of work in his favor if he gets that counterattack. It's not required, but it's a nice thing to have. And if he gets to go first, then he's already where he wanted to be to begin with. Now, Corax is most definitely the cream of the crop. He was not my second Primarch. I think he was my third Primarch, but he was the second one I really openly played because I got him when Raven Guard released and just dove wholeheartedly into him. His ability has never changed. That says a lot. His ability has never changed. His reckoning has changed slightly in regards to what happens with it. For a while there, they took away the whispers. When you play his reckoning, he gets one final whispers, basically. Well, not whispers, stealth. He goes into stealth one last time, and then he shifts over into this beast, the Raven Lord, of just applying sentenced and just dishing out massive combos. Now, a lot of people don't go that route with him, just for the simple fact that it's a very fragile state to be in at that point. You've got to have all the pieces to get the right amount of sentenced and ping damage off. You lose the protection of the stealth that his primary form offers. But the fact that his ability has never changed, he remains sturdy, playable. He can duck and dodge and weave with the best of them. The only weaknesses he has is when your opponent, knowing that you're playing Corax, has got a well-timed stealth in play, or that they're playing against you, they've got some well-timed anti-stealth that they can save it in hand. And obviously right now, I'm going to try to not necessarily talk about the warp retreat effect which is going on, because that is going to change. So even though it's something that has seen play in the last month especially, it's not contingent, it's not integral, it's not part of the Raven Guard. It's a neutral that is being utilized, but Corax in general can utilize a lot of just general tactics, damage dealing to get opponent's health or troop health down to 1, use his ability, hide in the shadows, go for the long game. If you're playing Corax, the cards that you really want to see your opponent throw down, whether it is on purpose or by mistake, is cards like Arcology. Farron's Militia is one of the best. Anything that you can easily get to 1 health and just have a constant stealth. Toads, even in that extent. Toads and the Rot Flies from the Ruin Storm. They're so small, light, and they're very easy to get to 1 health. And then there's a constant barrage of them that you can just always have a chance to duck in and out of. Corax can utilize the tactics of the Raven Guard as well as the various direct damage tactics that exist, or random damage tactics that exist in the neutral card pool, to basically bide his time as best as possible. If he can do damage on the Warlord, great. If he can hide and get his hand just so to make a massive strike when he needs to do it most, then he can certainly do that too. He is very flexible. The thing that has really hampered him in the past when the Raven Guard were in the decline was really more or less the support cards that he had within his faction, and he had to rely more and more on those random cards from neutrals, and it kind of watered down his ability. But for the longest time, he was a very solid performing warlord. A lot of people don't like stealth. It's a part of the game. It's not just a part of the game, it's a frequent part of the game, and there are multiple ways to break stealth, deal with stealth. get rid of stealth, especially when it's a stealth on a warlord that you can relatively have some control over how he gets it. And if you're not playing troops, he's never going to have stealth. If you play high health troops, troops with ward or survivor, it's going to make it even harder for him. For a while there, especially following one of the patches that the Salamanders got, the Salamanders could really give Corax a run for his money because they could give survivor to their troops repeatedly, making it harder and harder for him to do anything as they build up this massive board, and then just start flaming things and just start burning things, or just beef up so much to the point that that as soon as he breaks out of stealth and can't get back into it, he's just toast. So overall, a solid warlord. He's in the shop occasionally with his alternate art. I'm not a fan of the artwork itself, but I recommend picking it up. I'll tell you, when I got Corax and I started playing Raven Guard, I just listened. I just had Metallica going on in my head for like 2 months, and I didn't regret it, and I'm okay with that. You know, that's the mood, that's the heavy vibe. Nikon Shuriken is the 4th warlord that was added to the game, and he's kind of like Corax light. Still high initiative. He's got a predictable stealth pattern, but it's not contingent upon your opponent's troops. It's more contingent upon how you operate. He can deal damage. He can duck back out. With the troops that exist within the Raven Guard, he has a lot of support there. He can easily have a stealth board with himself included and then go in for a killing strike. Turn that off. Oh, get back to the game, son. There we go. He can easily have a stealth board with himself included. As far as neutral cards that he utilizes, I think, Command Bridge as a legendary is good across the board in Raven Guard to some extent if they're not running too many tactics, just for the simple fact that you want to get that Raven's Talons out when you want to get it, or an inescapable cell even at them is very good too, just giving that Survivor 2 to your Warlord, as well as there are so many troops within the Raven Guard that have rallies. For Shuriken specifically, I think a Silent Death is really good because what that does is on those turns where he can't go into stealth, but he wants to duck and weave, it buys him the extra time to deal the 3 damage, or stun all enemies, or stun all undamaged enemies, deal the 3 damage, get back into stealth on the next turn. Also kind of in the same pattern, but instead of broken up over 2 turns, it's in 1 turn. It's much later in the game, but that's orders from Terra, which allows him to basically use his ability twice. It's a 10 energy effect that you're going to have to pay it with, though. 2 plus 4 plus 2, and 8 energy. It's tricky, but it can be used in a pinch. You really have to build your deck right and know how you're playing Shuriken in order to include that card in there. Otherwise, I really would go with the stealth options that exist, stealth troops. You could throw in Emirates Mercenaries and a lot of cheap tactics to bolster them up, like an escape vent and the like. But I find that, where are they? For the longest time, Firewalkers were really good with Shuriken. Not so much anymore. However, we still have the Felisian 5th Airborne. As susceptible as Shuriken can be to anti-stealth, Raven Guard in general, to anti-stealth, I think that if you've got some other troops to kind of help break that up, it's useful. Accurate Tread. Some other cards that work well with Shuriken, if you're using it seems pretty weak, but these guys actually can work late game, maybe even early game, depending on what you're going for, just to kind of build up that stealth board. For the most part, he can function almost 100% within the Raven Guard card pool, just because of the nature of the cards and how they are currently, which actually kind of goes across the board, except for Vincent 6. Vincent 6 actually works a lot more now. He has been changed twice over. At one point, his ability was 2 energy ability, and it gave +0/+2 to the units next to him, I believe, to an adjacent or to adjacents. Then they changed it to a 1 energy ability, which could give +0/+2, or +0/+1, +0/+1 or +0/+2 to units adjacent to him, which could affect 2 units. And then they finally went back and they've changed it to this 1 energy that gives +0/+2 to a friendly unit, which actually can include himself. Since the change, that third change, he's kind of dropped off for a while there. Once Vincent 6 could get rolling with the flank troops or frontline troops and consistently buff up their health, it could get out of hand. But that same strategy is still relatively useful, especially if you're able to make use of cards like Tech Servitors to bring out some of the Mechanicum's troops. Their frontline troops are already relatively strong, or sturdy, if we should say, right? But then we bring out vehicles for cheaper, bolster them, and then you've got potentially on your opponent's turn, you've got a 6/6 and then a 6/8. And that's just one unit there. All the while, you're continuing to drop more and more nasty vehicles or troops, healing, frontline, protecting 6 while he's bolstering bodies. And if the frontline doesn't work, then you're using it with the Raven Guard troops that have got flank or sneak attack, such as the Celero Bikes or the Scimitar Bikes, and you begin to really just build this strong, solid board. I think, quite frankly, I think he's in a decent state to see that play again with the addition of Drilling Sight. With the addition of Drilling Sight, as well as cards like Arcology, which are currently seeing play. Arcology may be changed down in the future. And I'm not saying necessarily pump up Arcology's health, but if you've got several Calth infantry and you can pump up their health, you can get more and more use out of the Arcology. But also, within that regard, having that Drilling Sight lets you get out your normal troops that you would normally play, whether that be stealthed Raven Guard Astartes or sneak attacking troops, flanking troops, or if it's just your standard, if you want to go full on in the Mechanicum and at 4 energy, drop a Sagittary Squad, maybe even a, I don't want to say Arcadius, but maybe a Xyni just for the cheaps, because you've got the energy, because you played Drilling Sight, and then make these guys a 3/5, or make your Helios Mortar a 2/9 at 6 energy, and at the same time drop a Celero Bike, or keep your Mortar carry out for a 2/7, give your Celero Bike 2 extra health, so you got a 2/4 plus the Mortar carrier. There's a lot of combinations there just with that one card that really can assist Vincent 6. In addition to him just bolstering his own health and having the natural Raven Guard things. He's a lot more passive, so he's not doing any sort of active attacking. He is relying on other troops to do that, but I think the game is generally kind of shifting to that degree, and if you're able to get some bodies on board, especially bodies who can continually have their health increased or are healing, or just have got attacks that don't require them to directly face strike, you're going to get a lot of value out of Vincent 6. And he's not bad for a starter. He's not as good as he once was, but he is decent, and he is, I don't think he's getting any weaker, if that makes sense. So you've got a strong pool of warlords relatively. I mean, Vincent 6 doesn't draw as many people's attention as it used to, and most people play with Shuriken just because they like that high initiative, they like the idea of the stealth, or they like the character for that instance. But Nev is very functional. Nev works very well. And Corax is just solid all around. So with a very strong, I would say just a very strong, solid warlord card pool, probably in the same degree that you have for the Sons of Horus, or even Emperor's Children is arguable, depending on how you feel about Biolucius. You've got the foundations of a good thing going. Let's get into the troops. Now, Gallivak Squad has never changed. And quite frankly, these guys are just bad. They don't have, you have to play several cards to really get value out of them, but the 1 health makes it so hard for them to survive anything, whether that is Informant Network, random damage from defensive satellites, which even on the lowest defensive satellites is still going to kill these guys, things that go, that target multiple things or random things. I just pass on Gallivaks. No thanks. You might see them in event decks. You're never going to really see them anything to get use out of them. They don't have a rally effect. They don't have anything. And then if you use them to attack for that 1, you got 1 attack. We did 1 damage. It just doesn't do anything here. Hidden Realm is a very good tactic. I mean, you're going to hear me say that a lot for the Raven Guard tactics because they really do have strong tactics. This returns a friendly troop to your hand, not to your deck, and gives it flank, which means that you can play it a second time. And as I mentioned, there are so many strong rally effects from the Raven Guard troops that is good. But this isn't just Astartes. You can use this with Ambassador Malgator. You can use this with these wonderful little mortar guys. You can use this for with las rifle section. Anybody who's got a rally ability, I like using it with the Hannon's mortars, just because they can spam out five more damage, just 4 more damage, and then attack if I need to use them. Or I can throw them down with the Melgator. Or even the Secretary Peltast, if you want to go that route. Pi Alpha, being able to return a healing and a stun removal and hold that up in your hand. It's just a really versatile card. I like having one of them in a deck. Two, if you're going for a particular hit and run combo, it might be okay. Or like if you're really going super control-y with, like, Ambassador Melgator, 2 inescapable cells, a lot of things that target troops to remove troops, it's okay. But the flank portion is going to lose some impact if you're playing against warlords who don't have troops. And it doesn't draw you a card or anything like that, so you're really just making value out of that. I like it as a 1, just as a very surgical, like, this is the one time I'm using it, and I'm making the most of it. I feel the same way about Shadow Walk. Shadow Walk is really good, don't get me wrong. It gives stealth, and that's a permanent stealth. As long as they aren't attacking, they're going to keep that stealth. It gives it to a troop, and it heals them for 2. Now that's a lot unlike some of the other tactics that exist within other factions that might give them stealth until the end of the next turn. I think even the Night Lords, they've got one that gives stealth, but then they also have got, like, this one just gives stealth to a friendly infantry or Astartes, but then they've got ones that give it to the next turn. This gives it to a troop, which can be a vehicle. It can be a mortar carrier. Usually it's not. Usually it's Apothecary Coleman, but it can very easily be an Astartes. It can very easily be a sneak attack troop. It can be your wonderful speeders. It can be your Javelin Speeders after they come in, break stealth, attack, kill a unit, and then you heal them, and then they go into stealth. It's just a very versatile tactic. But again, I like having just one of them in a deck. I think you could make an argument for having 2, depending on the troops that you've got in your deck, especially if you're going for troops that have semi-higher health. But the reason I like having 1 is because a lot of the Raven Guard troops that you're going to see don't have high health. They have 2 or 3 health. So if I'm healing them 2, they have to survive, and also that has to put them in a comfortable range for me where any sort of anti-stealth or random damage isn't going to outright kill them, which is why Apothecary Coleman is such a good candidate for that, because he's got a high health pool. So even if he doesn't need to heal, he's got 6 health already. It's going to be very hard for my opponent to just kill him while he's stealth, versus, a 2 health troop or even a 3 health troop that's very easily disposed of. So that's why I kind of waffle on that back and forth. Now, Ohlone Squad was changed recently. They're slightly better. They do combo with the idea of sentenced, right? They can deal 1 damage, and then if the target dies, they gain stealth. Before, they just had deal 1 damage as a rally. There was nothing else to it, and I think as the game went on and there were comparable cards within other factions that just had better effects, it felt as if there was something lacking there. So as an Astartes, they receive this: if target dies, gain stealth. And that's okay early on. That's not bad for a combo deck for Sentence. That's great late game. Just that 1 extra damage can easily do an additional 1 to 3 more damage for 2. But they're very vulnerable with that 2 health. They're vulnerable to a lot of things. So you have to know what you're building for in that deck. I wouldn't just include these guys just because they're a 2-cost Astartes. Curse of the Raven. This is just a good card. This is like the frag grenade from the Sons of Horus ramped up. It draws a card. It's a rarity higher and it costs 1 energy more, but it's worthwhile. I feel like you should have 2 of these in your decks because it helps with combos. It's part of combos. That damage can apply to sentenced effects and it combos very well, but the fact that it draws cards fuels the combo concept and lets you get to what you need to get or add more pieces within your hand. This card right here, amongst many others, is part of the current Warp Retreat trend, but again, we mentioned that's really going to be fading away, and it's still going to be a tool within the Raven Guard deck for the reasons that it always has been, whether that is another combo that rises to the top or just the fact that drawing damage. I really like using Curse of the Raven in conjunction with Corax and spreading out the damage and possibilities of going into stealth or sneak attack, or also Shuriken being able to use that and for 4 energy basically deal 4 damage to 1 target as well as 1 damage across the board. No Witnesses is a situational card. You could put one in your deck, but the fact that it doesn't target a warlord is really where it loses me. Now, the benefit here is that this gives a permanent sentence too. It's not till end of turn. It's not for that one thing. So if there's a high health troop or a troop with survivor and you can't finish it off on your turn, that troop still has sentence 2. It's still going to take additional damage on the next turn. So your opponent has got to make the most of that, or they're just going to risk losing that troop altogether. It's a decent card, but it's not fantastic. I think it's properly priced, and the fact that it's a common makes sense. Umbra Squad is integral to the combo builds. Getting these guys out first turn or second turn is really nice because right off the bat you can begin to increase your damage and do more damage. And if you're playing with Nev, you're doing more damage and you're drawing cards and getting things set up, and that's super important. They're fragile, yes, but that's their role. And if your opponent has to spend resources to deal with these guys, then they're spending those resources that they can't use later when you drop out the heavier versions of this card. I really like this card. It doesn't go in every deck. It doesn't go in every deck. It definitely goes in Nev. It might go in a Corax build or two, but it works very well. I think their ability has remained the same. There's another squad here that's very similar that was changed for a very good reason. Well, I can't say it was a very good reason. It made sense. Celero Bike, again, another troop that has never changed. It's got sneak attack, and it's a rally. It gains fast, not flank, fast, which can be good. These guys are just very part of the combo of so many things. You know, you drop a Numus, or you've got Numus already in play. You drop Celero. For 3 energy, you just did 3 damage from your Celero Bike, not to mention whatever your Warlord's doing. That's just a basic play. That's not even counting late game stuff where you're throwing in additional tactic damage or whatever the case may be. So Celero Bikes, very good. They're common, but they're such a flexible, good common to have. You don't throw these guys out unless you've got a troop to throw them out with. There's no reason to do that. Tactical Retreat, you know, I've just never seen it. I've never seen it played. I've never seen it used. While this gives stealth to your damaged troops, and that's, again, troops, not just Astartes, it's more expensive than the Shadowwalk, but affects all of them. But because of the low health of the Raven Guard, it's so rare to have multiple troops attacking and then surviving to go into stealth mode. I think Deliverance takes it up to a better notch in terms of how it works. Tactical Retreat kind of stands in line that you have to have troops that have survived, that they've taken damage, and then they're going to go into stealth. And that's all it does. It doesn't heal them. It doesn't do anything for that. It just kind of, they retreat, and you hope that they can live to fight another day. It's okay if you're looking to fill a void, or if you want to go and really amp up the idea of an all stealth deck. It certainly could fit, but I don't suggest it. Blindside, I also don't suggest. Don't pick this card up in the shop. This is just not a fantastic card. This was actually changed. This was 4 energy at one time. This was 4 energy. It was lowered to 3 energy. The ability is the same. It gives sneak attack to a friendly unit this turn. Actually, I think for 4 energy, it gave sneak attack to all your units, and it wasn't great. It's still not great. It's just pass. I'm going to pass on this. It's just the fact that it draws a card is a saving grace, and it only costs 3. It's not worth spending gems on. It's not worth picking up in the shop. It doesn't work in other decks. You're just better off having a troop that has a rally effect. That's just my opinion. Now, Deliverance, for the longest time, I thought Deliverance was the worst Raven Guard legendary. I don't think that anymore. I think it's gotten moderately better in the fact that before it was draw 3 cards, and if you draw any troops that have stealth, they gain +1/+1. It was a way for Raven Guard to draw more cards, but 9 times out of 10, you never drew stealth troops. More and more as the game progressed, you weren't even including troops in your deck. You were just using Deliverance to draw cards, and there's better cards to use that for. Now this actually does something that's very Raven Guardy. You know, it gives all your units stealth, and they heal too, and you draw a card. It's very much a legendary version of Tactical Retreat. It functions kind of in the same way, although it's more disruptible than Nostromo for the Night Lords, because your opponent can still play anti-health, anti-stealth, but you are essentially ducking out of combat. Whatever pieces you have on the board are healing. You're building up for your strike. You're reconvening at Deliverance. It makes sense thematically. It's a very good card, and your opponent can bank on you playing it. If they're smart, they'll have a anti-stealth for that time, but if they don't have it, or if they misplayed, then you might just have all it takes to win on the following turn. And even if you don't, this heals your Warlord too, and that's never a bad thing. So it buys you a turn. Now, Fury from Above, this is one of the pieces of a combo that was changed only slightly. I lamented when it was changed, not because I used it a lot, but because I saw the value of it for the Legion, for the faction, the way it works. But it used to deal 1 damage to a random enemy 4 times instead of 3. Same cost, didn't change anything differently because it was random. You might end up spreading it across 4 different units. At the time, at the game, there were many more decks that were playing with troops and units, so the odds of that damage being spread about was higher. Gradually, decks began to shift to mono warlords, primarily Angron, and that was really kind of a stifler for people, or not just Angron, but like Fulgrim and like decks that like to hold everything and drop everything all at once in one turn. The Teloth's Changers spam, as it were. So they were very vulnerable to that. And if you could have a Numis squad give sentenced, and for 4 energy, you could deal 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1, and then throw in a Warlord Strike for 2 + 1, and maybe even other stuff if you had more energy or other things set up on the board, and you could really get it up. I'm skipping Inescapable Cell here, but Corvident Squad is part of that combo that was just nasty. Corvident Squad initially gave enemies that it damaged sentenced 2. And this was a headache for so many people, especially one of the reasons why Nev received medium initiative instead of high initiative, because first turn he would drop Numis Squad. Second turn he would drop Corvident Squad. Third turn he would trigger Numis, he would attack with Corvident, he would Fury from Above, and he would do about 24 damage. Now, that's over the course of 3 turns. That's over the course of having 3 specific cards. That gives your opponent 3 turns to prepare and or do something to shut that down. But a lot of players weren't doing that, or that wasn't happening. And not that it was dominating by any means, but it was enough of an experience where they chose to change both Corvident Squad to give sentenced 1 and Fury from Above to give 1 damage 3 times instead of 4 times. In addition to that, Corvident Squad actually had its health reduced for a while there to 2, and they just recently got that boosted back up to 3 health. So there is some improvement on that end, but the massive combo is not as massive as it can be. It can still certainly happen. Yeah, theoretically, as it stands now, if you were to do that 1 + 1, you would do 1 + 1, and then you'd have sentence 2, and then you do 1 + 2 + 1 + 2 + 1 + 2, which is right in there is 9, is 11, and then you throw in Nev, giving it 2 + 2 is 13, 15. So same combination, doing 9 less damage, I think. You can check my math and let me know if I'm right or wrong. Scimitar Bikes. This is just an epic. This is one of those ones that just right out the gate was strong. Hasn't changed. It's very good. It does what it does. It's fragile, absolutely. It doesn't have to be if you're playing Vincent 6, but it helps. It gets rid of a frontline troop generally that costs 3 or 4, because that's usually they have 4 health. And then if your opponent has to respond to it, they have to respond to it. If they cannot, they're going to take 4, and they're going to take 4 the next turn and the next turn. So even if you're not attacking your opponent's warlord with the Scimitar Jet Bikes, your opponent is some way has to deal with this 4 attack. And if they don't have any damage in their hands, that means that they're going to have to take the 4 attack to the face. This is just a great card, and you should have 2 of these and make ample use of them. Celery Squad is a good card. In general, they're unstoppable, which is nice. They have a very nice rally effect in the fact that it pings for 1, 2 times. Again, amping on the sentenced concept, right? Little pings, but added with the sentence, these guys can just do a lot, and they cost 3. The fact that they've got 2 health makes them vulnerable, but their rally makes up for that. You are throwing these guys down there mostly to do their ping damage and to draw heat away from your warlord. That's okay. They do their job very well. They're very good common and often a nice piece of a combination. Surprise attack. I tried building a deck with this. I really did, and it's never been able to work. The amount of troops that you have to have with stealth in there to make use of is hard to do than you. It's harder than you would think. It's just for 3, it doesn't work out very well, and generally. Then you use it, and then all the units with stealth go out and they attack and they die because they've got low health, and then that's it. You don't have anything else to work with. So this is just not a great card. Not a great card. Torvaic Squad is nice because they've got 4 health and they're fast. So even though they've got 2 attack, again, that can very easily do more damage because of the sentenced effect. And they're fast troops. So that's good for whether that's dealing with a troop, whether that's dealing that last damage on your opponent's warlord. These guys are really good. I have no complaints there. Apothecary Coleman is fantastic. I like the artwork. He's solid cost. He's got a great ability. He was one of the first abilities that actually healed. There was different tactics and things that healed, but he was the first one really that kind of like, here, I'm just going to heal you with pay energy and heal 3. You get that somewhat with the Salamanders and the Iron Hands, but not in the same consistent way that Apothecary Coleman does. And because he can draw cards if your troops are dying, he serves a dual purpose, and that's why he makes such a great troop to put into stealth mode, because you can afford to have your low health troops die, get more cards, heal your warlord, things go on. Very good. Pick him up in the shop. He is worth it. He is worth it. Kate Squad is just meh. You know, they're unstoppable, they're 5/3, they're common. There's a card like this for just about every faction. Some have flank, some don't. Given how the rest of the Raven Guard function, I don't think he needs flank. I think you can get the same effect from an epic, which costs 1 less energy, or even at a lower cost, you can get something similar with Celero Bikes. They do a lot less attack, obviously, but they still work. Cade, I just pass on. Now, Kaelan Squad is not bad, and we're going to talk a little bit more about them when we get to more Dathan. But Kaelan Squad, although it is susceptible to Melgator with a 3 attack, the fact that its ability only costs 1 and it gives sentence 2, and they've got 5 health, that's not to be laughed at. These guys, when they hit the board, your opponent has to deal with them, whether that is attacking with flankers or their face or tactics, using a removal option. They know that the hurt is going to come, because even if you leave them on the board and they don't attack directly with their 3 attack, they can use 1 energy and your warlord can do 3 damage. 4 damage, actually. 2 attack from the warlord and then 2 attack from the sentenced, not counting any other cards that you might throw out, such as Celero Bikes or a Fury from Above, or whatever the case may be. So they're a very good card to have. Now, if you're not playing with sentenced, if your deck isn't built around that, you could pass these guys. They're not going to give you any value. They don't have a rally effect, so they're not going to have immediate impact. So depending on your deck, you may skimp on the Kaelan Squad. But they are a good rare to have, and even as a one of in a few decks, just to draw that fire or to help ramp up whatever your deck is trying to do, they function well. I like Ordair Squad. I don't see any reason not to have these guys in there, even though they cost 4 energy and their stats are 3/3. The fact that they've got this rally, deal 2 damage, and they're unstoppable is just nice. Their 2 damage can go to anything, whether it is a warlord, whether it is a troop. It's useful in all regards. And then they are on the board and they've got unstoppable and they've got 3 health. So they're a little bit harder to get rid of. They're going to require 1 to 2 cards to get rid of them. I don't ever feel like you wouldn't want these guys in your deck. The Raven's Talons is just good. It's just good. I think the only warlord that it doesn't need to be in is Vincent 6. And that's debatable, because it's never bad to have that option of giving your warlord sneak attack. But if he's using troops that have got sneak attack or troops that have got frontline that are doing more of the damage, then maybe it's not going to serve him as well. However, having sneak attack on anybody else is just, it's a free 2, and then the game shifts in your favor. You don't have to pay energy to do damage. You're doing damage. Your opponent has got to attack you or pay energy to attack your warlord, or they're going to consistently fall behind. This is just a solid card and a must-have for Raven Guard. I would probably say that's the #1 legendary to have for the faction, outside of Corax, outside of the Primarch. Now, Victorus Mortis. This is such a combo-y card, and I've seen it in event decks, but most recently I've really there are more pieces to try to make use of this card, and when you do, it's really fun. It's more of a meme card than anything else, because it's relying on you having troops on the board, whether your opponent has going to kill them or not, and then also if you have the combo pieces in hand to maximize the damage that can come of Victorus Mortis. For the longest time, in terms of neutrals, all there really was the Rhino from Chaos that would create cultists, and you could put this out there, have this attack, or have your opponent destroyed on their turn, and you've got some wounded zealots, and then you play Victorus Mortis, and then they've got backlash that deal 2 damage, and you've got 3 of these wounded zealots that do that. You can still do that. However, thanks to arcology, you can do it even further. You can deal that with the Calth Infantry, or you can just, when your opponent destroys the arcology because they want to get rid of that, then they have to deal with 5 Unsettled Populace. You play Victorus Mortis, and that's 5 1/1s that all have backlash, deal 2 damage, which can be improved upon by giving sentence to whatever it is that you want to deal the damage to, and hopefully that random damage will land and splash on them. Now, arcology may see some changes that may be inputted. Again, this is a meme card, and its high cost, the 4 energy, really kind of drives it back in not being something to include in a deck unless you're just trying to make that combo work or you want to play something to surprise your opponent. It can do, but it's not going to do every time. Usually, at the most, you might get 2 backlashes out of the deal, and it's very predictable, or usually by the time you get it out, your opponent's got multiple troops on board, so the random damage aspect is not as important or not as effective as you want it to be. But it is nice when you do make it happen. And that combos really well with For Whom the Bell Tolls. Just the doom, just the doom is dropped here. You give sentence 2 to an enemy this turn. That can be a warlord. This is awesome late game, playing a For Whom the Bell Tolls, followed by a bunch of Victorus Mortis on your little civilians, and they're dealing 1 + 2 + 2 + 2 each time. It's just the death knell, and that's just 9 energy, but that's just that meme deck. We're not talking, not counting other cards that already exist that could ramp up this damage. Late game, you've got so many options that you can throw at it. For 8 energy right there, that's 2 + 2, plus your Warlord 2 + 2. That's 8 damage just from this 5 tactic troop now, or 5 energy tactic. Again, the faction as a whole is a combo-oriented faction, so you have to have these pieces in your hand to make work. This card is really a one of, maybe a 2 of in certain decks, but a 1 of just to hold off when you have the pieces to unleash the combo. Having multiple options and multiple ways to go about your combo are super important. Guerrilla Warfare, for the longest time, actually, Guerrilla Warfare has seen a change. When it came out, it was 4 energy, and it had deal 1 to 2 damage, I believe. It might have been just deal 2 damage. It might have been just the exact same thing as Artillery Strike, except it drew a card, and it was targeted. It wasn't random, so it was like Artillery Strike, the neutral, but because it was a Legion specific, it was better. Then they made it 5 energy, and it dealt 1 to 2 damage, draw a card. And that really hurt. That hurt the Raven Guard a lot more than I think they initially realized it. And as time went on, that became stale, and it felt like this card needed improvement and was changed to deal 2 to 3, drawing a card for the same cost of 5. It's a lot better with the deal 2 to 3. The game itself has seen an increase in health for troops, ways to increase stats and buffs of troops, so that makes sense. It can be a 2 of in a deck. At least as a 1 of, it's nice. Is it better than Artillery Strike? Yes, and I say that because the possibility of dealing 3 damage is there, but also drawing the card, and because it's targeted. That kind of makes up for it. While it may not affect the entire board, Guerrilla Warfare is probably more reliable than defensive satellites. It's going to hit the units that you want to hit. You have a smaller window of error for it, so it works better that way. Javelin Speeders, I don't know if this is the best rare in the faction. because there are a lot of contenders, but this is definitely one of the best stealth removals in the game. The fact that it has stealth and flank, and it's got just a beefy 6 attack and 4 health. Yeah, there's no reason not to have 2 of these in a deck. If you've got one of in your deck, you can make it work, but you've got to be very, very smart in how you play it. I just really like that. I really just like that troop. And I think a lot of people hate seeing it because they know at 5 energy, if they've got a stealth troop or they're going to go into stealth and they're playing against the Raven Guard, they're like, okay, I'm going to go into stealth. Oh, yep, there's his Javelin Speeder, just like I thought it would be. And because the faction has got these combo elements that can play cards that draw cards, the odds are increased that you're going to see Javelin Speeder. It's nice when you play a game and you don't see Javelin Speeder because you got lucky. Lyso Assault Squad. Now these guys, they're commander scored, but with a Shuriken deck, I think they work fairly well. People don't expect them, and the fact that they've got 4 health, they can survive. They can survive any sort of anti-damage or random damage that your opponent's going to throw at you. And then you could time that with the Deliverance after they attack and get even more value out of them. So they're not bad, but they're very limited in how you play them out there. They might work decently in a 6 deck as well. I don't think they fit in Corax or in Nev. And because they're common, there are other rarity cards a smidge higher, such as Mortar Squad, that make better use in your deck. Now, Mortar Squad was recently changed, and before that, it was recently changed, and before that, it wasn't used at all. When Mortar Squad came out initially, I believe it was a 6/3, and it might have been a 5/4. It was either 6/3 or 5/4, same cost, and what it would do is rally. It would deal 1 damage to a unit with sentenced. That's it. Like the unit had to have sentenced on it for it to deal 1 damage to it. But that was harder to do, especially as the faction received various changes and nerfs to the troops that applied sentenced. So the recent patch gave them a 5/4, gave them 1 extra health. No, I think they were a 6. I think they were a 6/3. And it hasn't been that long ago, and for some reason I've forgotten about it. But the rally effect remains the same. Give sentence 1 to this turn and to an enemy and deal 1 damage to it. So you're getting, 1 damage plus 1. So you're getting 2 damage on a rally from Mortar Squad, plus whatever else that you have in hand or on board to work with. These guys really, probably one of the best Raven Guard changes that they received. Deliverance is a very strong improvement too, but these guys made the combo faction get back a piece of their combos. They have a troop, they have a rally effect, and they have the sentenced component all in 1 card. And that's why it was such a good improvement. Now, Warp Retreat aside, which makes ample use of this just cycling late game, because we'll see somehow, some way that's going to be curbed. Whether that is this card itself that gets affected or it's Warp Retreat that gets affected, we're going to see that impacted. This card is not bad. This card is really good. I don't know why you wouldn't put 2 of in your deck unless you're going like no troops. And even then, if you're going no troops, these guys function well because they give you sentenced to combo off of. So just a good improvement. Umbra Secundus is probably one of those cards that took the hit most recently, the hardest for the longest time. Straight from release, it was deal 2 damage, and the next Raven Guard troop that you play gains fast. That was it. And that was it from the get-go of the faction release. And eventually, just recently, they changed it to deal 3 damage, but now that troop gains flank instead. As a result, this tactic has dropped in use. The Raven Guard, I think, fell back onto the Warp Retreat combo versus any other playstyle, which is unfortunate because they can play very well without Warp Retreat, believe me. And this card is not as great in terms of using this. I would just rather pay 5 to deal some damage across multiple troops and draw a card. Flanking is not going to do me as much for a faction that already has a lot of flankers. It's just not, unless it's late game and I'm dropping Coleman and I can heal, or I'm dropping this guy down here, the newest squad, and I can put a sentence. It's less effective than you would think it would be. So not a fantastic change. It's unfortunate, but It once was a solid card. It is now a pass card for me. A Vain Squad, you know, when they work, they work. They're very high cost. They're very high cost, but if they can survive in stealth, your opponent is going to take 5 damage. They will lose stealth, and then you still have a 4/3 troop on the board that your opponent has to get rid of. The problem is that 3 health, especially as the game has got a lot more anti-stealth or random damage, the odds of getting them to use their ability are not as high as it used to be. You can make it work. You could make it work, but I don't know how good it would be. Although you could play their ability, boom, deal 5 damage, and then play Deliverance, and then they go back into stealth. So that is to be said. Vain Squad is okay. You just gotta know what you're doing with them. If I had to choose, in terms of 5-drop Astartes, if I had to choose between Lyso, Mortis, and Vanes, I'm gonna go with Mortis every time. Dravian Clade got good, because for a while there he just gave enemy vehicles sentence 3 and nobody was playing vehicles. The game itself was shifted away from the vehicle meta completely because there was just a lot of vehicle hate, hard removal. Ambassador Melgator could return any vehicle to the hand. There was no point. Vehicles were slow, they were heavy, they were ponderous, they didn't do anything. Then we got vehicle meta, and we also got Canis Vertex, and they patched across all the legions to give some sort of Titan response, and Clade has that. Giving sentence 3 to Titan weapons is huge. I've never been able to use it because Canis Vertex has just kind of dropped slowly off the radar. He's still out there, but just not as often. Solid stats though. These are one of the few Marines, few Astartes that we've actually got here that have got over a 6 health. I mean, in the faction pool, you've got Apothecary Coleman, you've got Clade, you've got Killed Squad, and you've got the Deliverers and the Shadow Ones, and those are all above 6 energy. So it's a very light faction, but he's got high health, he's got high attack. He doesn't do much else beyond that though. He's not going to do much else for you. He doesn't have a rally effect or anything like that, so he's optional for me. Right now, honestly, I'd rank him as the lowest. Not a bad, not a terrible legendary, but probably the lowest required legendary. He's not required. If you can put him in a deck, great. He's not going to be an integral component for you. So if you don't have him, you're not missing him. Mordathan. Now these guys have got the same stats that they've always had. Cost 6, 4, and 5, and they've always had stealth. Their ability, though, once cost 1 energy. Did the exact same thing, wasn't any different. Dealt either 6 damage to a sentenced enemy or they gave it sentence 2. They were just really good for coming in, marking the opponent's target, and actually, did they cost 6 or did they cost 5 energy? They might have cost 5 energy. It's been long enough. They might have cost 5, but if they didn't, I think they cost 5, then they went up to 6, and their ability went up as well, and that really slowed them down. They can work, sure, but when they changed the Raven Guard faction, I found that they just didn't. I found that they were too slow and ponderous. The way the game has got, I'd rather play a Mortar Squad, get a little less sentenced, and go the way that I go. One of the things that was nice about Mordathan at the time, when their ability cost 1 energy, is it comboed really well with the Cades next. At 10 energy, you could drop Cades, use their stealth, deal 8 damage, and just go from there. You don't have that option anymore, unless you're packing Drill Sight. And then you really just have got to, not escape vent, drill site. You've really got to be lucky, and you've got to have the right setup. I don't know if I would include them in my decks anymore. They're not bad. They might go in a Shuriken deck better than a Kurz deck. Yeah, maybe. Killed. Now, I've seen these guys go back and forth in some Kurz builds. Not necessarily in Shuriken builds. I like the fact that they give adjacent units +1/+0, because then you can throw out at 8 energy. You can throw out a 3/2 Celero Bike, plus your Warlord has got 3 attack, and maybe they've got the Raven's Talons, and then your opponent takes 6 attack from sneak attacks. Not to mention, then on their turn, they have to deal with a 5/6 troop, plus the 3/2 troop that's sitting next to it. But you've got to build the deck for that, and in a faction that has got a lot more rally effects and impactful effects, it's harder to do, or it's not as attractive to do. It doesn't say that they can't do it. I just find that if I had to choose between, a 6-drop and a 5-drop who gives me immediate combo play, the 6-drop is okay, but that 5-drop nudges out just a little bit more because that 1 energy less lets me do more things later in the game. Delivers I have seen used as just a one of for people who are like making some sort of defense to try to stave off victory or stave off defeat. They've seen them in event decks, but that's about it. I don't like the fact that they're contingent to give frontline. They're 7/7. That's a nice stat. That's very beefy. It just feels like they're a common, and it feels like they're a common. It feels like they could be better, but they're purposefully not because they're not a high rarity. Now, Shadow Wardens is very interesting because their ability hasn't changed, but I think the way the game has gone, they've actually gotten a little bit better. A lot more warlords and games are focused on attacking versus damage or tactics, which for a while there was the thing. When Raven Guard were very dominant, they used tactics, they used sentence, so Shadow Wardens didn't do anything for you. It was a 7/6 body that would never deal this 5 damage or deter your opponent from attacking, or at worst, your opponent would attack with like a really meager troop, like a sneak attack or Goldstone Hunters, and then Shadow Wardens would come out of stealth, and then they would use Ambassador Melgator, who could target these guys at the time, return them back up at the hand, and you lost all your momentum. But where the game is at now, with Kabanda, Sanguinius, Angron, any sort of the World Eater decks in general, I think they're not bad. Maybe not as a 2-of, but as a 1-of to deter. And at the very least, if your opponent isn't deterred, they have to deal with the 7/6 that's coming out at them. A 7/6 that you could very easily put right back into stealth on the following turn and still retain that ability. And even if they're not stealthed, they still have that protection factor where they're dealing 5 damage. So they're better, even though they haven't changed, they're better than they were. I would suggest having a 1-of in most decks. I'm not gonna take back that statement. No, I don't like these guys. Ancient Crazen, it's a cool idea in terms of backlash, deal 2 damage to all enemies, because theoretically you could have sentenced or apply sentence to things, but because it's a backlash, it can be done on your opponent's turn, and then it's not as effective. Also, for 8 energy, I feel like these guys should have frontline, even though the Raven Guard are not very heavy on the front line. They're very lacking there. This, just in the same way that Deliverance feels bulky and not a lot for what it is, I feel the same thing for Ancient Crazen. I would just pass on that. At 8 energy, really, Dark Fury is the card that you want. Yes, it is an epic. It is worth it. It is a 6 health and stealth, which means that it is going to survive just about everything that your opponent can throw at it, unless they're doubling down with 2 defensive satellites or an Astral Warfare, whatever the case may be. And then they've got this awesome ability. Whether they attack for 8 with an unstoppable attack, or they choose to use their ability and deal 7 damage and go back up to your hand, and then you can play them again. And because their ability only costs 1, at 9 energy, you are going to be able to use it and play them again. And at 10 energy, if you really want to get creative, you could play Dark Fury. You could attack with Dark Fury, use Hidden Run, then drop your Dark Fury, and lethal, good game. I don't know if the argument is there for having 2-of in a deck. 1-of is always good. 2-of can be very good. And if you're going to put 2 Dark Fury in your deck, then you should double down on the Hidden Run for just that instance. Go the long game, stay alive, get to that point, and then really just dish out damage. That's your win condition in that regard. Now, speaking of win conditions, Cade's next. Oh, this guy drew a lot of heat and ire when he came out, and he's good. Not as good as he once was, and for a long time he wasn't good at all. He was 9, still costs, again, same stats, comes out with stealth. This is probably one of the beefiest stealth troops in the game. And when I say stealth troops, I mean troops that come in the game with stealth. I think the Ruin Storm have one that has got a 7/7 for 8, that comes in at stealth. We've just got a 9/8 for 9, and then on top of that, he immediately gives sentence to 1 to your opponent's warlord. Right off the bat, he's bolstering whatever you've got him on your board to attack with. That in of itself can be enough to win the game. He used to apply sentence 2 to the opponent's warlord, which was just devastating. Very strong, not unbreakable, but really frustrating for a lot of people, which is why they changed it. And then what would happen is if you couldn't get rid of him, either Conqueror or Winnow the Weak or some sort of removal, Sedition's Gate, then you were also going to take a 9 attack to the face plus your 2 stealth plus your Warlord plus your 2 stealth, and that was pretty much it. That was pretty much game. Or if your opponent was lucky and they were able to play the initial Umbra Secundus right off the bat, then just turn 1, 9 plus 2. That's a lot of damage right there. When they changed him at first, they made his ability all of a sudden an active ability. He had to pay energy to give sentenced 1, and while that sentenced stacked, and you could theoretically, over the course of 5 or 6 turns, give sentenced 6 to your opponent's warlord. That's a lot of time wasted and time spent for such a beefy attacking troop. And as the trend has kind of shifted to try to make those high-cost legendary troops useful, such as Grulgor was a good example of one that was just not seen play, and then they shifted and they made him worthwhile. They kind of went back and they revisited and they changed Cades to how he is now. And he's not bad. He's okay. He's good. I'd say he's good, but he's not as great as he once was, and depending on your deck itself, he may not be necessary at all. At 9 energy, that's 1 card, maybe 2 if you're playing something like Hidden Run or Shadow Walk, or you're lucky enough to have reduced the cost of something with abandoned supplies. But that's about all that you're going to get out of it. Whereas opposed to if you're playing cards that have got 5 or 6 energy, that have got a shorter reach, but a more limited reach, but at cheaper cost, you can apply more cards to them. An additional, you can play, Curse of the Raven twice, in addition to Mortar Squad for 9 energy and deal more damage that way. Versus Cades and then sit back a turn and then play all those cards. So there's an argument both ways there. I think he's good. I think he definitely dropped. He used to be the game winner for the faction. He's no longer the game winner. He's a very useful tool. I would probably rank him just middle in terms of the legendary. He's definitely worth picking up, but he's not worth having in all your decks if you're not going that route. So you really want to kind of consider that. And Valverin, just pass on these guys, man. That's just a joke. It's a cool looking card as far as the vehicle goes. It gives frontline. It gives frontline, and then it puts in a unit of deliverers who don't have frontline. So just no pass. And then we're going to talk about the counterattack, and I think this is one of my top 3 counterattacks, because stunning is always good, and a lot of people forget that the Raven Guard can do that. They forget that because you typically have got high initiative warlords, so the odds of you getting this counterattack are not as often, which means warlords like Nev and 6 really benefit a lot more from it. And 6 being able to put down a Farron's Militia, give it a 2+2 attack, and then stun your opponent's warlord could be nice, sure. But what about going, putting out a bunch of combo pieces or a Celero Bike and some other 2 health attack troops, setting up your board for some sentenced, and then stunning your opponent's warlord. And then just when they got over the sentenced, you go into Deliverance. It's just a good counterattack. It's one of my top 3. I think the one for the Iron Hands, giving them shield, is another one of my favorites. I'm trying to think what the other one was that I really, really liked. I liked them all. I think the Sons of Horus one is really good too. So, Word Bears. Oh, Word Bears is such a good counterattack too. Oh, now that I'm thinking about it, there's so many good ones. But this is definitely my top 3. Absolutely. Stun is that's just good. And even though it's not anything to do with stealth, anything to do with sentenced, it staves off, it lets you fall back, it lets you really put together the pieces of your combos more, and that's what the faction does. So that's the Raven Guard card by card, guys. A lot of cards. Looking at the whole of the faction, very few of these cards have been changed for the better. Most of them remain the same. A few have been changed to reduce how powerful they were. As a whole, the faction works very well. I think there are a couple cards that are dated or that could be improved upon. I'd like to see more Dathan at the same level that he could be versus like the Moratat for the Orphans of War. I'd like to see Surprise Attack be a useful card, or Victor Mortis cost 3 instead of 2. Same effect, but just give it a little bit of something to it. I'd like to see Blindside actually be useful. but they've never were to begin with. So I'm not missing anything. And even if I'm not missing anything, I still have so many cards that are really good cards that gel together very well, that synergize really well, and let you do several different things, whether you want to do a sentence deck and have a lot of pings and a lot of combos, or you want to focus on one specific beefy combo. If you want to go the long game and sit in the shadows and beef out and just go nasty high power attack, or if you want to go mid-range. As much as Mortar Squad is a combo deck, the mid-range with the Raven Guard, their game is very strong as a mid-range combo. They can respond well, they can, go in and out, and then kind of seal the deal once the pacing has worked out to their advantage. So as a whole, it's a very good faction, and it is one of the few factions I think that doesn't need a lot of neutrals to feel strong. There are some neutrals, like I've mentioned, that definitely improve upon it or help it, such as Drilling Sight. Arcology is one of those. Command Bridge, Atham, Silent Death. Those are all very good cards, and you notice I'm picking, for the most part, lower cost cards, with the exception of Arcology, because lower cost cards can be fit into a combo easier. If you've got 2 or 3 energy cards at 10 energy, you can do more with them, versus having one. We talked about it with Cade's Next, one card, that's it. You can have 2 or 3 cards in a faction that does combos. That's better. So hope that's been useful for you. I hope that's given you some ideas. I hope that's inspired you. They're not a quiet faction. They work well. They play well, and I have fun with them. I have fun playing with them, ducking in and out of the shadows, applying sentence and justice as I deem it worthy. So I hope that's something for you guys, and that's it. Next time we're going to be taking a look, as far as the card by card goes, we're going to be taking a look at I think we're going to have to get into Thousand Suns and Space Wolves. Let's do it. Until next time, keep playing Legions, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.